happen to a girl like me? What will my family say? Oh, what will Joseph say?
Hey, sweetie. What's going on? What's the matter? Do you want me to get the pastor? He's here.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to come here and pray.
What can I do for you? What's going on?
I'd rather not talk about it.
Sometimes talking about things gets it off your chest. You know, we girls need to stick together.
Well, I've been getting sick lately during my first hour, and today one of my friends told me I should take a pregnancy test because I could be pregnant. I don't believe her. I mean, it just couldn't be true. After school today, I decided to listen to her just for peace of mind, and it was positive.
Oh? Well, how old are you, and have you told your parents?
I'm 17, and no, I just found out. How could I tell them?
Well, to be honest, you don't have to.
What do you mean? They will find out.
You are too young to raise a child. Girls like you won't give a child a good life. Can you imagine what it would do to you? Don't you have dreams or plans for your future? Having a child would stop that. You know, you could just get rid of it.
Rid of it? Do you mean an abortion?
Oh, no, we don't call it that. You don't want to make a bad decision to determine your whole life.
Hang on, let's just stop there for a second. You know, sometimes we're faced with some tough decisions, as we saw in the skit here. Things happen that we don't expect, things that we don't quite plan for, and frankly, sometimes the choices we're left with require more than we anticipated. But on the other side of that, we can also have the opportunity to help, to be a voice of reason, to guide others in the right direction, to even be a wall of protection that declares not on my watch. Last week we started a series looking at particular times in Jesus' life where he made some rather remarkable claims, what are called his I am statements. And these remarks that he made depict a specific relationship that Jesus has with us and with his Father in heaven. Last week we talked about Jesus being the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. And we looked at in Bible study how sometimes that statement can be pretty contentious because Jesus is clearly telling us that there are no other belief systems, no other religion, not even the good deeds that we do will get us into heaven. Rather, it only comes by way of grace that it comes from God as we have faith in his Son. And that was a tough one, as we talked about, for a lot of people to accept. Today we're getting into a different I am statement that Jesus said when he was kind of confronted by a group of Pharisees. He said, I am the Good Shepherd. And so this morning we're going to talk about what that means, what the implications are for us as believers, as walkers in faith, but how that fits in with our skit as well. Now, when you think of a shepherd, what are some things that come to mind? Maybe someone in a cloak or a tunic, and they've got a shepherd's crook maybe in their hand or a big stick. Have you ever seen any pictures with Jesus as a shepherd? Now, I don't know how old, I wouldn't say it was too old, but there used to be a lot of pictures around where Jesus was surrounded by sheep and he'd be carrying one on his shoulders. Maybe you have one at home or maybe you know someone that has one. But Jesus was depicted as this good shepherd. And it used to be pretty common to talk about it that way. I was doing a little bit of research and I came across something that I didn't really know before, but some of the very earliest pictures we have of Jesus, paintings of him, were of the Good Shepherd. The oldest one to date goes back to the middle of the 3rd century in a catacomb in Rome. And it's Jesus with a lamb on his shoulders. So that image was very significant to the people then. And so this passage is significant for us today. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Jordan and go on a tour there, see some different things, and we were in the bus, and we happened to see some shepherds. We don't see that too much around here. They weren't carrying their sheep, but they were leading them from one oasis to the next, and they were living kind of that nomadic lifestyle that we would picture during Jesus' lifetime. They still had to take care of them and feed them and make sure they didn't wander off and guide them where they were going. And that's usually what we think about when we're talking about shepherding and sheep and that kind of stuff. Like, for instance, when we talk about Mary and the birth of Jesus on that first Christmas Eve, and the angels appeared to the shepherds and told them the good news. So all of those images are part of the shepherd's life. But this morning we're going to look at it from a little bit different perspective. Because there was a part of the shepherd's life that was often very difficult and challenging. When young King David, well, before he was even king, he went to King Saul, and there was this big guy, maybe you've heard the story before, his name was Goliath, and they were going to battle, and none of the Israelites wanted to fight. But David went up and he said, King Saul, I'll do it. But Saul looked at him and kind of shrugged him off, and he said, you're just a boy. How could you make any difference? How could you do anything? Now, if you're not familiar with the story, David was a shepherd, and he was responsible for taking care of all the flocks of his family. And that was an important job. If he failed, if he lost the sheep, he didn't do what he was supposed to, that meant they would lose money, they would lose food, they would lose the clothing that would come from the sheep. So David had to be very diligent in what he did. And so he didn't give up when Saul said to him, you're just a boy, you can't do this. Instead, he explained what his job was like. David said, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it and I struck it and I killed it. Can you imagine doing something like that? I mean, most of us would probably picture if we were being chased by a bear or a wolf or a lion, we'd be happy that it was a sheep and not us, right? Well, after his speech, and much to the surprise of the army that was afraid to go forward, David got the job. So when we think of a shepherd in those terms, as a brave warrior or one who would go to any length to save the sheep, maybe even risk life or limb, we begin to understand what Jesus was talking about when he said he was the Good Shepherd. During the 1800s, there was a British journalist by the name of Henry Stanley. And he spent some time in the Great Plains among the Cheyenne people. And while he was there, he wrote in his memoirs of the things that he saw and the things that he experienced. And he talked about an elite group of men called the Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee. It's a weird name, but it means dog soldiers. In his words, this is how he described them. He said each one wore a sash around his waist called a dog rope with a picket pin at the end. This picket pin was a pointed stake typically tied to the end of a rope that could be driven into the ground to tether a horse, which could then graze and not wander off. Something that we might maybe hook a dog to in our yard so that they can play, but they wouldn't get too far away. Well, that was his first impression when he saw these brave men. This is what they were doing. He found out later that this tether that they had, this stake, was far more significant. You see, when the tribe was under attack or they had to flee for some reason, these men would tie one end around the stake and the other end around their waist, and they would drive it deep into the ground. Now, the tribe chose the fiercest, bravest warriors to protect their families as they tried to escape. And these men would stand their ground, tethered in their place, willing to die in battle rather than let the enemy pass by, because they knew that their sacrifice meant that others would be able to live. As we talk about Jesus and the Good Shepherd, we see something similar in what he was saying. Jesus said, I am the Good Shepherd, but right after that, he explained what that meant. He said, the Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Through the cross, Jesus drew a proverbial line in the sand, and the power of the devil and the curse of sin, as he fought against that, it was as if he took a stake and drove it into the ground, and he said, I will not move. He stood there, resolute, convicted in his decision. I kind of like to picture him like Gandalf, if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings, or maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi standing before Darth Vader. But it's like Jesus saying, Satan, you shall not pass. You know, when we think about what Jesus did in the life he gave for us, when we think about the cross, we have this image of a broken body, don't we? Someone who is going through excruciating pain. But sometimes we lose sight of what God was doing on that Good Friday and that first Easter. We miss what it was all about. You see, Jesus once and for all defeated sin and death, the power that it has over us. What he did was demonstrate the most amazing act of love, the greatest, most powerful act of strength and courage that anyone has ever seen. He defined at that moment what real love looks like. Because don't forget, Jesus was given an out. He had a choice. All he had to do was bow down and worship Satan. Just set aside the things that God wanted him to do, not worry about fulfilling his will. And if he'd have done that, he could have skipped the whole thing. Jesus could have weighed the pros and cons and saw what he was going to lose and said, you know what, that price is too high. I'm not going to do it. That's what the devil suggested in Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of the Christ. In the movie, Jesus was praying in the garden, and Satan was kind of whispering to him. He said, the cost is too much. Who are you to think that you can make a difference? There's nothing you can do to save those people. And yet, thank God he didn't listen, right? Thank God that he chose to go to the cross. You see, that's what our Good Shepherd did. He chose the more difficult path so that he could stand between us and the devil. He was willing to lay down his life so that we could be saved. And you know, as we think about that aspect of what Jesus did, we can find some comfort in that. We can find some encouragement in that. Because we all know there's a lot of things that go on in the world. Sometimes they're things that hurt us. Sometimes they're things that are painful and scary. But we can face them because of what Jesus did for us. Because he was our Good Shepherd. As Apostle Paul told his friend Timothy, he said, God didn't give you a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, a spirit of love and self-discipline. All the things that a shepherd would need. Which gets us back to the skit that we saw the first part of a few minutes ago. Today, churches around the world are participating in something called the Sanctity of Life Sunday. It occurs today because it remembers the anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion on demand. And if we didn't talk about it, well, we'd be remiss then, because it's a big problem. It's a big issue. And I realize it's a controversial topic. It's not something that people really want to talk about. It's considered too political, too emotional, too personal, too uncomfortable to discuss. But more and more churches are seeing that there's a need to talk about it. There's a need to be willing to do something about it. There comes a point where we put our stake in the ground and we say, no more. Something needs to be done. In a speech that Martin Luther King Jr. gave in Washington, D.C., he warned that there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must make it because conscience tells him it's right. Abortion is one of those times. We can go on our smartphones, we could go home and look on our computers. What would you say is the number one killer in the world today? What do you think the answer would be? Disease, war, maybe accidents, drugs. If we were to say that, we wouldn't even be close. In fact, if we added all of those up together, we still wouldn't be close. Recent study found that 41.9 million pregnancies were terminated across the globe in 2018. The World Health Organization believes that number is grossly misrepresented. It's too low. That's a problem. To help put it in perspective, let's pause for 10 seconds. 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 10. That amount of time, 13 children's lives were just ended. That's 1.3 babies every second of every day of every year. And those are just the ones that are recorded. It's a problem that needs a real and lasting solution. But it's not the only problem out in the world. There's a lot of other issues as well. Problem of broken homes and struggling families, the hardships of homelessness and poverty, sexualization of our teens and children, depression, addiction, pornography. The list goes on and on. Countless people affected by the devil, who, as the Bible tells us, roams the world like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. But you see, from our perspective, there's good news, because we can speak into these issues because of what Jesus did. We can put our stake in the ground and we can say, that's not good enough. We can't stand by while we let this stuff happen. It's not good enough that young girls are encouraged to abort their children. It's not good enough that people are living on the streets, that families don't know where their next meals may be coming from. It's not good enough that half the homes in America claim they struggle with pornography, or that drug addiction is on an all-time high, no pun intended. You see, as followers of Christ, we can have the courage to speak into these issues, to show love and compassion to those who are in need. And we can do that because we know we're not alone. We have a good shepherd who made a way for us, who went before us, and who leads us. We can be confident to follow his path because we walk on the word of God. We can set aside our fear because we have someone with a strong hand that'll pick us up when we stumble and carry us if we need it. We have one who was willing to bust through the gates of hell just to bring us home. That's what it means to say that the Lord is my shepherd. We think about that in the 23rd Psalm, where David said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. That's the way David understood God as his shepherd. You see, because we can have that confidence, we can be a shepherd to those in need. We have that confidence because of what God did for us. We have that power of spirit so that God can lead us to help those in need. So that we can stand against the different evils of the world, so that we can share the love of Christ with those who need to hear it. We can say, not on my watch. Not going to happen. We can put our stake in the ground and say, this is where we make our stand. That's the choice we have. We have a choice that we can either do something, we can make a difference. We can say that this is where it stops. Or we can take the easier road. We have to decide, though, which one we're going to do. Will you lead with courage? You see, Christ has set us the example to follow. So will you show mercy and give love and hope? Even though to the world we may seem like one person, one insignificant person that can't make a difference, to those who we share the love of Christ with, to those who are lost that we see in need and we help, well, we might be able to just change their whole world.
Oh God, why did this happen to me? This wasn't supposed to happen to a girl like me. What will my family say? Oh, what will Joseph say?
Hey, sweetie. Can I help you? You know, the pastor is in the other room. I can go get him for you.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to come here and pray.
Well, There's things that we can help you with. Can I do anything?
I'd rather not talk about it.
Sometimes getting things off your chest, they can help. And we girls need to stick together.
Well, I've been getting sick lately during my first hour. And today one of my friends told me I should take a pregnancy test because I could be pregnant. I didn't believe her. I mean, it just couldn't be true. Well, after school today, I decided to listen to her just for a peace of mind. It was positive.
Oh, sweetie. You know what? It's going to be okay. Take a breath. Have you told your parents yet?
No, I just found out. They're going to be so disappointed in me.
Oh, don't say that. God has a plan.
But what is it? What are my choices? Be a teen mom or go to a clinic and try to forget this ever happened?
Like I said, God has a plan. We may not know it yet, but you have other options. You could be a good mom if you got the right mindset and make sure your priorities are set. You could do it. Or you could always look into adoption. There are so many families that want a baby. The only choice you don't have is forgetting this ever happened.
Could you pray with me? And maybe then go with me to tell my parents? I'm not sure I can do this alone.
Oh, honey, you're never, ever alone. Through all of this, God will be with you, and there is a bigger plan for you and your baby. So yes, definitely, let's go pray.